Stand in the corner, Elena. Your miserable face ruins the energy of your brother's signing. My mother physically shoved me away from the boardroom table before I could even sit down. Just pour the water properly, she hissed. Servitude is all you are good at. Do not let your bad luck haunt this family's money. I did not scream. I did not argue. I just walked to the side station, picked up the water pitcher, and checked the watch hidden under my sleeve. 4 minutes. The mysterious investor they were all terrified of was arriving in 4 minutes, and they had no idea she was already standing in the room. From my vantage point in the corner, holding the condensation-slicked water pitcher, I had a perfect view of the family dynamic that had defined my entire life. To Arthur, my father, children were never people. We were economic units. We were lines on a ledger. My brother Julian was the asset. He was the high-risk, high-reward tech stock my father refused to sell, no matter how much value it lost. Growing up, the capital flowed in one direction. Private tutors. When Julian failed math, a brand new sedan when he led his first car drunk, seed money for a restaurant concept that folded in 6 months because he did not want to work weekends. My father called these bridge loans. He called them investing in potential. He poured our family stability into the black hole of Julian's ambition, convinced that one day the payout would cover the cost. And me, I was the liability. I was the safe, boring bond he regretted buying. When I got into college, he told me the liquidity was not there. I worked 3 jobs. I stacked shelves at a pharmacy from 10 at night until 6 o'clock in the morning, then went straight to my statistics lectures. I graduated with 0 debt and 0 help. When I landed my first job in risk assessment, Arthur did not congratulate me. He asked why I did not aim for a commission-based role like Julian. To him, steady income was for servants. Real men gambled. That gambling addiction brought us here to this cold room. The current crisis was simple. Julian had found a shortcut. He always found shortcuts. He wanted to buy his way into a prestigious investment partnership. The buy-in fee was $150,000. He did not have it. He had burned through his last bailout months ago. But he had convinced Arthur that this was it. This was the golden ticket that would pay back every cent and finally validate Arthur's decades of blind faith. I watched Arthur adjust his tie, his hands shaking slightly. He was terrified, but he was masking it with arrogance. He looked at me standing by the service station, my silence irritating him. You should be taking notes, Elena, he muttered, not bothering to look me in the eye. Julian is about to close the deal that secures this family's legacy while you pinch pennies and worry about rent. He is thinking big. That is the difference between you two. He leaned back, gesturing around the expensive office that he did not know I paid for. Julian is an asset. You investing in you for 30 years was the biggest loss of my life. You are a sunk cost, Elena. At least try to be useful today. Watch how the big dogs eat. I gripped the handle of the pitcher tighter. A sunk cost. That is an economic term for money that has already been spent and cannot be recovered. In rational decision-making, you are supposed to ignore sunk costs. But Arthur was not rational. He was an addict. He had spent so much on Julian that he could not stop now because stopping would mean admitting that his entire investment strategy, his entire life was a failure. So he sat there ready to sign away the only thing he had left, his paid-off house, just to keep the fantasy alive. He did not know that I was not the liability anymore. I was the auditor, and I was about to close the books on this family forever. To my family, I was the invisible girl who made sure the coffee was hot and the water glasses were full. But here is the secret I had been keeping for 5 years. I do not work in administration. I do not file paperwork for other people. I am a distressed debt investor. When companies fail, when they bleed money, and their assets turn toxic, I am the one who swoops in. I buy their bad debt for pennies on the dollar. And then I either restructure them or strip them for parts. I am a vulture to some, a savior to others. But to Arthur and Philippa, I was just Elena, the daughter who could not afford a new car. 2 weeks ago, my algorithms flagged a small, aggressive investment firm called Blackwood Partners. They were soliciting new partners with a buy-in fee of $150,000. It was a classic Ponzi structure, bleeding cash and desperate for fresh capital before the regulators shut them down. Julian had been bragging about Blackwood for months. He told everyone who would listen that they hadn't hit him. He said they recognized his genius. The truth was much simpler. They recognized a mark. They saw a desperate, arrogant man with a father who had a paid-off house, and they opened the door. When I realized my brother was walking into a buzzsaw, my first instinct was to warn them. I almost called Arthur. I almost told him to run, but then I remembered the birthday dinner where they made me sit at the kids' table. I remembered the way Philippa sneered at my shoes. I remembered Julian laughing when I told them I got a promotion, asking if I was finally allowed to use the color copier, so I did not warn them. I bought the buzzsaw using a shell company. I purchased the controlling debt of Blackwood Partners 48 hours ago. I did not just own the debt. I effectively owned the firm. I controlled the board. I controlled the hiring process, and I controlled the man walking through that door in 3 minutes. Mr. Sterling was not a senior auditor. He was my head of security and compliance. I had given him very specific instructions. He was to demand proof of liquid assets. He was to push Julian until he panicked. I watched Julian from my corner. He was sweating through his dress shirt. He kept checking his leather briefcase, tapping his fingers against the clasp. I knew exactly what was inside. He did not have $150,000. He had about $400 in his checking account, but he had told Arthur the money was ready. He had told the investors the money was ready to bridge that gap. He had done something incredibly stupid. He had taken a PDF of his bank statement, opened it in an editing program, and added 3 zeros. He had printed it out on high-quality paper, convinced that a piece of paper would fool a multi-million-dollar audit. He sat there clutching his briefcase, terrified that the deal would fall through, but completely unaware that the real danger was not losing the deal. The danger was the sister standing 5 feet away, waiting for him to hand over a forged document that would turn his desperation into a federal felony. The trap was set. All he had to do was walk into it. The heavy glass door swung open, and Mr. Sterling walked in. He did not look like an auditor. He looked like a verdict. He was a large man in a charcoal suit that cost more than my brother's car, carrying a leather portfolio with the indifference of someone who ruins lives for a living. I had hired Sterling 3 years ago from a top forensic accounting firm. He was loyal, efficient, and terrifying. Today, he was playing his role perfectly. He walked straight past me without even a glance, treating me exactly as my parents did, as furniture. He extended a hand to Julian. "Mr. Julian," Sterling said, his voice deep and smooth. "I have heard a lot about your ambition." Julian stood up too fast, knocking his knee against the table. "Mr. Sterling." "Yes, it is an honor. My father, Arthur." Arthur beamed, pumping Sterling's hand. "We are ready to move forward. My son is very excited about this partnership." Sterling sat down, opening his portfolio. The air in the room grew heavy. "Excitement is good. Solvency is better. We have a tight window to close this round of funding. I assume you have the liquidity proof we discussed." From the corner, my mother snapped her fingers. The sound was sharp, like a dry twig breaking. "Elena," Philippa hissed, pointing at Sterling's empty coaster. "Water now. And try not to spill it this time. Honestly, do we have to teach you everything?" I picked up the picture. This was the moment where the old Elena would have felt tears pricking her eyes. The old Elena would have felt shame burning in her chest. But I was not her anymore. I was the predator in the room, and silence was my camouflage. I moved to the table. I poured the water into the crystal glass with absolute precision, not a drop wasted. There is a specific kind of power in being invisible. When people think you are nothing, they say everything in front of you. They assume you are too stupid to understand the context. As I filled Julian's glass, I heard him whisper to Arthur. "I fixed the numbers. It looks perfect." I heard Arthur's breath hitch. "You're sure it is a PDF, Dad?" Julian whispered back. "They cannot tell." I set the picture down and retreated to my station. They thought my silence was submission. They did not realize it was discipline. The dignity of silence is that you hear the things that scream the loudest. Julian cleared his throat, regaining his bravado. He slid a thick cream-old envelope across the mahogany table. "Here are the certified bank statements. Mr. Sterling." Proof of $150,000 in liquid cash, ready for transfer. Sterling did not touch the envelope. He looked at me. That was the signal. I stepped forward, keeping my eyes lowered, playing the part of the nervous assistant. "I am so sorry, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "I forgot to mention. The document scanner is down. The network is undergoing maintenance." Julian frowned. "So just take the paper. Compliance requires a digital original for the blockchain verification." He lied smoothly. "We cannot accept hard copies for the initial buy-in. It is a security protocol." I turned to Julian, offering a helpful, apologetic smile. "Sir, could you just forward the PDF directly from your banking app to this email address? We can process it instantly on the main screen." I pointed to the large monitor on the wall. Julian froze. His hand twitched toward his laptop bag. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He did not have a banking app with $150,000 in it. He had a manipulated file on his hard drive. If he logged into the real bank, he was dead. If he sent the file he made, he was safe. Or so he thought. "Right now," Julian asked, his voice tight. "Time is money, Mr. Julian," Sterling said, checking his Rolex. "If we cannot verify funds in the next 10 minutes, I have another partner waiting in the lobby." Panic is a funny thing. It makes you irrational. Julian was so close to the prize, so desperate to be the big shot in front of our father that he stopped thinking. He pulled out his laptop. He typed furiously, his eyes darting around the room. I watched him open his email client. I watched him attach the file named Capital One Statement. October PDF. I watched him hit send. A second later, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Ping. I looked down. There it was. The email. The attachment, the smoking gun. He had not just sent a lie by transmitting a forged financial document across state lines via the internet to secure a loan. He had just committed federal wire fraud, and he had done it in a room full of witnesses, sending the evidence directly to the device of the woman he called a failure. I looked up at him. He was smiling again, closing his laptop, thinking he had won. He had no idea he had just signed his own confession. Sterling checked his tablet, acknowledging the email receipt. He did not smile. He did not offer congratulations. He simply nodded, as if a man sending a forged federal document was the most mundane thing in the world. "The liquidity is verified," Sterling said, closing the folder. "However, per the fund's bylaws, there is a 24-hour clearing period for digital transfers. To lock in the partnership seat today before the Asia markets open, we need immediate collateral." He reached into his portfolio and pulled out a document bound in blue legal paper. He slid it across the table toward Arthur. "This is a deed of trust," Sterling explained, his voice devoid of emotion. "It places a short-term lien on your primary residence at 42 Oak Street. It secures the $150,000 buy-in until the wire transfer clears tomorrow. Once the cash hits our account, the lien is dissolved. Standard procedure for high-velocity deals." The room went silent. I saw my father's hand twitch. This was not just a signature. This was his safety net. That house was the only thing he actually owned free and clear. It was his retirement. It was his legacy. Arthur hesitated. He looked at the document, then at Julian, and finally, his eyes flickered to me in the corner. I made sure to look small. I made sure to look like the daughter who did not understand finance. The one who was just there to refill the glasses. "Is this necessary?" Arthur asked, his voice losing some of its boom. "You have the bank statement." "The board requires hard assets, Mr. Arthur," Sterling said, glancing at his watch. "If you're uncomfortable, we can offer the seat to the next candidate." Julian panicked and leaned in. "Dad, don't mess this up. It's 24 hours. The money's there." Arthur hesitated, pen hovering. He sensed something was wrong, but Julian knew his weakness. "Once I'm partner," Julian whispered. "The bonus pays for the Boca Raton condo. Golf course view. You'll be the envy of the club." Fear vanished. Greed replaced it. Arthur had spent 30 years betting on Julian. Sacrificed his daughter, his savings, his morals. Walking away now meant admitting his life's work was a lie. His ego wouldn't allow it. This is how men build empires. Arthur sneered at me. We take risks. He signed. Sterling stamped. Clack thud. The deed of trust was recorded. The house was collateral. The trap was sealed. Julian smirked. When I upgrade security at the new estate, maybe I'll hire you, Elena. You're good at standing quietly in corners, Philippa laughed. With a better suit, maybe. I set down the towel, picked up my phone, and walked to the head of the table. Actually, I said calmly, you won't be hiring anyone. I plugged my phone into the monitor. Mr. Sterling, pausing. Sterling stopped. Listening. Arthur barked. Sit down. I tapped the screen. Document A. Incorporation records of the debt fund. Arthur read aloud. Elena Vance, I own the firm, I said. Sterling works for me. Silence. Document B. Real-time account balance. $4,126. Julian went gray. Document C. The statement you submitted. I highlighted the metadata created in Adobe Acrobat 1 hour ago. Font mismatch. It's a forgery. I faced him. You just committed federal wire fraud. Minimum sentence 20 years. Arthur dropped the pen. It was a placeholder, Julian whispered. You were going to steal the money, I said. Using Dad's house, I placed 2 documents on the table. Option A, I call the FBI. Julian goes to prison. The house is seized. Arthur shook. Option B, you sign a deed in lie of foreclosure. Transfer the house to my company. I don't press charges. Julian stays free. You can't. Philippa screamed. You already lost the house. I snapped. Choose who takes it. Arthur looked at Julian, then at me. He finally understood who held power. Give me the pen, he signed. I slipped the deed into my portfolio. Congratulations, Mom. Bad luck is now your landlord. I turned to Sterling. Wait in the car. If I don't come out in 5 minutes, send everything to the district attorney. He nodded and left. I looked at Arthur. You can stay. I'll cover taxes and maintenance. Hope flickered. But Julian leaves. Today, my condo's foreclosing, Julian cried. Not my problem. You're a liability. I walked out into the sunlight as my parents turned on their golden child. I didn't look back.